Hello, math students. Today we're going to be going over the lesson on function notation. We're going to be going over the tutorial, the practice, and the mastery test. So just follow along, write down everything I write. I promise it'll make a lot more sense this way, and everything else will make sense in the long run as well. So just follow along, write down everything, and work out all the problems as I work them out with you. So on the tutorial, let's go ahead and go to page 5. That's where the first problem is. And it says, Anna is saving to buy some souvenirs on a family vacation. She has already saved $125 and she saves another $2 from her allowance every day. Formulate and then graph an equation that models the amount Anna saves, Y, in terms of the number of days she adds to her savings, X. Okay. So basically, let's get my snipping tool here. So basically, here's our graph. The amount she currently has, it says $125, and she saves $2 every day. So our equation is going to be Y equals 2X plus 125. Now notice the starting amount she has is 125. Then her growth rate, or in other words, the amount she saves is $2 per day, where X is the number of days and Y is how much she's saved. Notice X is the number of days, that's your independent variable. And the amount saved depends on the number of days. So let's go ahead and graph our equation. So this tells you your Y-intercept. We're going to get used to seeing this. Y equals mx plus b. You're going to see this much more in a later unit as well. But the b is your y-intercept. So that tells you where you're going to cross the y-axis. In our case, we cross the y-axis at 125. And then our slope is 2x, or our slope is just 2. So what does that mean? That means for every day, she increases the amount she has by $2. So how do I graph that next point? Well, one way I can kind of look at it is, well, how much will she have saved? And I could just pick a number of days. So how much will she have saved after 20 days or 10 days? I could just use one of these numbers down here. I'm just going to use for 5 days. Okay, so use 5 days. So I'm going to replace X with 5 in this case. This will give me, I'll have 5 comma something. So the way you do that is you replace X with 5. So this becomes 2 times 5 plus 125. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 plus 125 is 135. So it's going to be like around here-ish. Well, I don't really like that point that much because it doesn't land on the grid lines that well. So maybe I'll try with, well, I know it'll definitely work with 50 here. So let's figure out how much she'll have after 50 days of saving. So I'm going to replace this X with 50 in this case. So 2 times 50 plus 125. 2 times 50 is 100. 100 plus 125 is 225. So I know there'll be, this point will be right here. So scratch that. We'll be using 50 comma 225. Okay, and you place that coordinate point there. So now when you graph this thing, we want to do a point. We're going to do a point at right here, and then another point at 50 comma 225. And you could select this ray, and let's go ahead and make the ray like that. That looks great. Oh yeah, correct. Let's go. Now go ahead and skip ahead. You could read this stuff if you like, but let's just skip ahead to where it stops us. And in this lesson, we're going to learn about a new notation. It's called function notation. And this is going to be your first look at it right here. The way you read this is f of x, f of x. So this reads f of x equals -2 times x minus 4. F of x equals -2 times x minus 4. Okay. Now, when you see f of x, you might be it's a little confusing when you first see it, because remember I've been saying that like when you see something right up against parentheses, that means it's multiplied, right? So when I see 2 parentheses and then like a 5 here, this means 2 times 5, right? Which is 10. But when you see a function notation, this doesn't mean they're multiplied, okay? So that's the confusing part. These are not multiplied. This does not mean you have a variable f times a variable x. That's not what this means. What this means is the function's name is f, and it takes x as inputs. So x are the inputs for the function f. Now, I know that's confusing. Honestly, I don't like this notation. I think it's bad notation because it gets too confusing with what multiplication is, right? But this is the notation that, you know, math textbooks have decided to go with, and the math community in general has decided to go with. So just be aware that, and this is a key part of this lesson, is that this does not mean they're multiplied, okay? Now, see this -2 up against this parentheses? This is multiplied, right? -2 times x, and then -2 times -4. This gets distributed here. See, this is the confusion, right? Because usually when something's up against parentheses, we think multiply. And that's not true for this, but it is true for that, okay? I know. But the more you work with it, the more you'll kind of understand it better, okay? But anyway, -2 times x is -2x, and then -2 times -4 is +8, okay? Now, let's see. Another way you could think of the f of x is that this is your output. This is your y variable. This is your output. So another way to look at it is just like this. Y equals -2 parentheses x minus 4. Okay. Okay. So the f of x, just think of it as your y. That's your output. This one says h of x equals -4x minus 7 when x equals 3. So here it's telling you the input. We're going to input 3 for x. So we're going to replace x with 3. So in this function, h of x, we're going to replace x with 3. So what is this going to look like? H of 3 equals -4 times 3 minus 7. Notice I'm replacing the x here and the x here with 3. Now, you read this, by the way, as h of 3, meaning the output of h when the input is 3. -4 times 3 is -12. -12 minus 7 is -19. So we would say h of 3 is -19. Make sure to plug that in there. And moving along. Suppose your soccer coach is ordering duffel bags online for your team. The online store charges $16.49 per bag plus $10.50 for shipping and handling of the order. Suppose X is the number of bags ordered and G of X is the total cost of the bags. Select the function that models the relationship, then select the cost of buying 12 bags. So we're going to find the function G of X. Now, G of X is the cost. Notice it's $16.49 per bag. So $16.49 times the number of bags. Whenever you see like per this, that means that amount is getting multiplied for each something, right? So $16.49 times the number of bags. And then there's a $10.50 shipping and handling. So the $10.50 doesn't go up or down, right? In other words, that's a constant. Whether you buy 2 bags or 20 bags, the $10.50 doesn't change. The shipping price doesn't change. So that's going to be our constant. So that's going to be this one here. Notice it's function is g of x, or in other words, the cost, is going to be $16.49 times the number of bags plus the constant, $10.50. Now, they also want to know what's the price of buying 12 bags. So in that case, we're finding g of 12, replacing the x with 12. So that's going to be $16.49 times 12. Again, replacing the x with 12 plus $10.50. All right. Hopefully you have your calculator ready. Okay. 16.49 times 12 plus 10.5, 208.38. Page 19, they stop us here again. I'll put these all as unanswered. Unanswered, great. Okay, activity. In this activity, okay, blah, blah, blah. All right. The high school jazz band is selling homemade leather bracelets at a local craft fair to raise money for a trip. The group spent $200 on supplies, which is enough to make 260 bracelets. The group is charging $2 per bracelet at the craft fair. Select the correct answer from the drop-down menu. Suppose B is the number of bracelets sold. So F of B is the profit the band makes on sales. In this situation, B is the input, okay? Is the input. So that's the independent variable. Okay. F of B is the output. That's essentially your Y. F of B is your dependent variable. That's essentially your Y. In other words, B is the number of bracelets sold, and F of B is the profit. So the profit depends on the number of bracelets sold. All right, we want to be writing this function, F of B, which is the profit function. So for profit, this is a general equation, not just for this problem, but in general, profit is always the selling price minus the cost, okay? In other words, revenue minus costs, that's how we calculate profit. So what's our revenue in this case? How much money are they bringing in? The selling, okay? Well, they're selling them for $2 per bracelet. So we're gonna call it $2 per bracelet, but we have to subtract out costs. How much did they spend on their supplies? It says $200. There you go. Suppose the group sells exactly 100 bracelets. So what would be their profit? So we're going to go ahead and grab our function here. F of B equals 2B minus 200. So that's our profit equation here. And we want to know what would be their profit if they sold 100 bracelets. So we're going to do F of 100, replacing the B with 100. So 2 times 100 minus 200. What's this? Well, 2 times 100 is 200. So we have 200 minus 200, which you probably already know is 0. Okay, 0. Well, what does that mean? So our answer will be 0. That means they didn't actually, if they sell exactly 100 bracelets, then they broke even, meaning they didn't gain any money, they didn't gain any profit, but they also didn't lose money. So they're at this 100 bracelets is their break-even point. Which statement about the situation is true? The maximum value of the range. Okay. Let's see. So let's think about what they're asking here. Which of these are true? This might be select all correct answer. The maximum value of the range is 200. Okay. Well, remember, how many bracelets were they able to make? Hopefully you remember, it was 260. So they made 260 bracelets. So at best, they sell out, right? They sell every single bracelet. So what would be their profit in that case? So let's go ahead and calculate that. So what would be their profit if we do an input of selling 260 bracelets? So this would be $2 times 260, right? Because they're selling them for $2 each, minus the costs, $200. So 2 times 260 is 520, minus the costs gives you a profit of 320. So at most, they'll have a profit of 320. So that's the maximum value of the range. Okay. The maximum value of the domain, well, let's think about this. So the domain is how many bracelets they sell. Okay, the domain is how many bracelets they sell. Well, what's the lowest amount they can sell? 0. 0 is the lowest amount that they could sell. What's the highest amount that they could sell? Well, they could sell all their bracelets, which is 260. So for our domain, our input values, the lowest input value possible is 0. And the highest input value is 260 in this case. So the minimum value of the domain is 0. Okay. For the range, in other words, the outputs, the lowest value in the range would be 0. So, well, actually negative 200, right? Because if they sell 0 bracelets, they'll actually lose $200. And then the highest possible profit is 320. Okay, so our domain and our range. All right. Well, with that, that's the tutorial. I hope that made sense. But we're going to go ahead and go into the practice and also into the mastery test. Okay, so let's go ahead and start the practice here. And let's take a look at the first one. Let f of t be the sales of a gaming product in thousands of units after t months. Okay, so f of t equals 5t plus 11. So f of 3 equals, so what we're going to do is replace t with 3. So in order to find f of 3. So this will be 5 times 3 plus 11. That gives me 15 plus 11. So that's 26, right? That means that blank, the blank. So let's see here. Let's go to the practice here and try to figure out what they mean here. Oops. So that means after 3 months, the number of products sold were 26,000. So the reason it's 26,000 is because the amount was in thousands. Okay. All right. If h is a function and -7 is an element in its domain, then which of the following statements correctly describes the expression h of -7? Does that mean we're multiplying h times -7? No. I remember I went over that. That means in this notation, this does not mean multiply. Okay. The expression h of -7 represents that -7 is the only element. No, it's just an element. It says an element. It doesn't say it's the only element. Okay. The expression h of -7 represents the input of h. No. The expression h of -7 represents the output of h corresponding to the input of -7. Yes, the input always goes in the function. So the input goes in here. Right, so when you have h of x or something, or h of something, the input goes in here. Given that a function g has a domain from -1 to 4, so its domain is from -1 to 4. This tells you the smallest number that the input can be and the largest number that the input can be. That's what the domain tells you. This gives you what the input has for possibilities. Now the range are the outputs. Okay. So the lowest output is 0 and the greatest output is 18. And it also says G of -1 is 2 and G of 2 is 8, which select the statements that could be true for G. Okay, well, one thing we could think about is a graph here. I think what they mean to say is that this function is continuous. It doesn't say that it's continuous, but we're just going to assume. All right, but it says G of -1. So -1, comma 2. G of -1 equals 2. So when the x value is -1, the result is 2. The output is 2. G of 2 equals 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have this here. Okay. Then it says, can G of 5 equal 12? I mean, I suppose it could. Well, actually, no, it can't. And the reason why is because our domain is only from -1 to 4. So 5, we can't have a 5 for our domain, right? Because 5 is not in our domain here. Okay. What about, can we put 3? Yeah, 3 is in our gap. Can it equal 18? Yes, 18 is a possible range. So I'd say that's possible. I would say this one's possible too. And this one is not possible because you can't have -2. Select the statement that can be true. Oh, actually, this one can't be true. All right, this is a tricky one. But notice it says G of 2. G of 2 is 8. So you can't have G of 2 being 8 and also have G of 2 being 4. So this is wrong. Because you can't have an input of 2 and have 2 different outputs. Okay, we learned that in the last lesson. Okay. Oh, words and decimals, my favorite. Stanley is filling a water tank that already has 10 gallons of water in it. He is filling the tank at a rate of 4.75 gallons per minute. This situation is represented by the following function, where n is the number of minutes. So we have this function, f of n equals 10 plus 4.75 n. If Stanley fills the tank for a maximum of 10 minutes, which of the following represents the domain and range of the given function? So the domain is the time, right? So the domain is the time that he's filling it up. Well, it says he fills the tank for a maximum of 10 minutes. So our domain, you can fill it from 0 to 10 minutes. Okay, so I would say it's either this one. So this one I'll put a maybe. I'll put an M for maybe and an M for maybe because they both have that correct domain. You see that? Now, what about our range? Well, what if we put 0 into our function? So what is f of 0? Well, f of 0 would be 10 plus 4.75 times 0. Well, that'll just become 0. So f of 0 is 10. So for our range, we know our minimum value is 10. Well, what's the maximum value in this case? Well, for that, I'm going to do f of 10. Again, replacing the n with 10. So f of 10 would be 10 plus 4.75 times 10. Again, replacing the n in the function with the input 10. Well, what does that result? Well, this would be 10 plus 4.75 times 10 is 47.5. And we go ahead and add those together. So that's 57.5. So I would say this one is the correct one. From 10 to 57.5 is our range. So these are the possible outputs. These are the possible inputs. These are the possible outputs. Question 5 in the practice. Let f of t be the number of units produced by a company t years after opening in 2005. What is the correct interpretation of f of 6 equals 44,500? Well, this 6 represents the t, so that's our input. And that's the number of years since 2005. So if I'm doing 6 years from 2005, well, that would be 2011. Okay, so I know it's this one. And that the result or the number of units produced is the output. So 44,500 units produced. All right. Harry pays $28 for a 1-month gym membership and has to pay $2 for every fitness class he takes. This is represented by the following function, where X is the number of classes he takes. What is the total amount Harry has paid if he, or has to pay, if he takes 12 classes? So essentially we're finding f of 12. Again, X is the number of classes he takes, right? So if we're saying he takes 12 classes, that's an X value of 12. In other words, an input of 12. So replace the X with 12. And let's go ahead and solve what the output would be. So this is 24 plus 28, 52. The notion T of X equals blah, blah, blah. What does T of X represent? T should be multiplied by X. You should know that that's not correct. I explained that multiple times. No. In function notation, that's not, this doesn't mean multiply, okay? The value of T of X depends on the value of X, since T is a function of X. Yeah. Okay. T of X is the dependent variable, and it depends on X. X is the independent variable. So T is a function of X. Which statement is true? A function is a relation where each output value is assigned to exactly one input value. The domain of a function is a set of all output values. No, domain is all input values. The range of a function is a set of all input values. No, the range is output values. To write the equation y equals ax plus b, in function notation, substitute f of x for y. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, this first one's a little mixed up. A function is a relation where each input value is assigned to exactly one output value. So these need to be mixed around in order to be true. So as it is now, it's false. Okay. Question 9. Rewrite the following equation as a function of x. So we want to first write it as y equals, because when we write it as y equals, then we just replace y with f of x to write it into function notation. So y, or your output, we could replace with f of x equals. Okay, so my goal here is to get y by itself. So we're going to solve for y here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do to help me solve for y is I'm actually going to subtract 8y right here. Subtract 8y on the other side of the equation, because whatever we do to one side of the equation, you have to do on the other side of the equation. So I've got negative 8y equals, and I'm going to kind of flip this around a bit. So I'm going to put this 4x minus 28 on the right side, just like that. Lastly, I'm going to solve for y by dividing both sides by negative 8. Divide by negative 8, divide by negative 8. So y equals, now I've got 4 over negative 8. Well, that's going to be a negative because a positive divided by a negative is negative. Now, 4/8 I could reduce to 1/2. So it'll be 1/2 x. And then this negative 28 over negative 8. Negative divided by negative is positive. And I could reduce this fraction as well, reducing it by 4, giving me 7 over 2. So negative 1/2 x plus 7/2. Question 10. So this one's more of the same. I want to get y by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 7y, and I'm going to put this on the left side of the equation. So negative 7y equals 56x plus 21. Then to help me solve for y, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 7, divide by negative 7, divide by negative 7. When you divide or multiply, you have to divide every term by that, or multiply every term by that. Okay, that gives me y equals, now here's a positive divided by a negative, so that's going to be negative 8x. Again, positive divided by negative, negative 3. Negative 8x minus 3. There you go. Okay, now we're going to go on to the mastery test here. So I'm going to have 20 questions here, and you are going to have a sample of these 20 questions. So you're going to have only 5 questions, but there'll be 5 of these 20. Now, if you found this useful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and it helps the algorithm. Okay. A function is a relation where each input value is assigned to, I think what we're looking for is exactly 1. Yeah. The blank of a function is a set of all input values, the domain. Okay. The blank is a function, a set of all output values. So I think you should know that one. To write the equation y equals ax plus b in function notation, substitute blank for blank. You should know this one, okay? I'm gonna help you at least a little bit on every question, but I'm not gonna give you the full answer unless it's a really hard question. Okay, this next one, we're going to go ahead and graph some points here. Notice using the given function, plot all the ordered pairs for the values of the domain below. So here we have to plot quite a few points. I'm going to help you by helping you plot just a couple of these points to get you started. So first, let's replace x with negative 8. So negative 8 is going to be our, I guess here instead of y, I should put f of x. So here I'm going to replace x with negative 8. So what's that going to look like? Well, f of negative 8. By the way, whatever I write, you should be writing down. That'll help you a whole lot in understanding. So again, replacing the x with this input of negative 8. How do we multiply a fraction times a whole number? Well, we've done it already a ton during this class so far. You take the number, the whole number, multiply times the top, divide by the bottom. So -8 times 3, which is -24, divided by 2 is -12. Then we also have a +4 here. That gives me -8. So -8, comma, -8. So in this case, with an input of -8, the output is also -8. So I'm going to go ahead and put that point where it belongs, -8, comma, -8, right here. So you would go to the point tool, click on that, and then put a point right here, -8, -8. I'm going to go ahead and help you with the next point as well. So here we're going to try an input of -4. I'm going to go ahead and change colors here. So input of -4. Let's go ahead and figure out what the resulting output would be. So I'm going to use the same function, but this time I'm replacing the input with -4. So 3/2, so 3/2 times -4 plus 4. So again, to multiply times a whole number times a fraction, multiply times the top, divide by the bottom. So -4 times 3 is -12, divided by 2 is -6. -6 plus 4 gives me -2. -4, comma, -2. So my next point would be right here. Now for the remainder of these points, you're going to just plug them in and figure out the resulting outputs. So replace x with -2, replace x with 0, replace x with 2, replace x with 4, and you'll get some outputs here that correspond to these inputs. Now keep in mind that these points should all line up. So if you do it correctly, all your points should be in a straight line, okay? So that's a big hint for this one. Number 3, click and drag. All right. Let f of t be the number of vinyl records sold by a record company t years after 1950. Match each equation to the statement it models. Okay. 91,299 vinyl records were sold in 1961. Okay, so how many years is that since 1950? So what you do is 1961 minus 1950. And this tells you how many years since 1950. Well, that's 11 years. So my function would be f of 11. F of 11, since it's 11 years, 1961 is 11 years after 1950. And the result, or the output, should be 91,299. So this one would go right here. Okay. Based on that, figure out the rest. Okay, number 4. Let A of X be the amount of money remaining on Hillary's gift card after purchasing X apps on her phone. A of X equals 50 minus $1.25 times X. In other words, each app costs $1.25 here. Since A of 12 equals blank, so to find A of 12, what you're going to do is replace X with 12. So A of 12 is going to be 50 minus 1.25 times 12. Okay, so go ahead and calculate what this is to figure out what goes here. Keep in mind, you do this multiplication first before you do the subtraction. All right. Once you have that answer, that means Hillary will have blank dollars remaining on her card after purchasing blank apps. Okay, so figure that out. Betty sets up a lemonade stand and charges $1 per glass. It costs her $50 to set up the stand. Which function gives the profit she makes by selling glasses of lemonade? So P of G is going to be our profit function. Okay. Now, in order to calculate profit, remember, it's always your revenue or money coming in minus the costs. So what's the revenue? Well, she's charging $1 times however many glasses. So that's the revenue. minus the cost. So in our case, the cost is 50. Find the value of h of negative 67 in the function below. So h of negative 67 means we're going to replace the x with this input of negative 67. So it'll be negative 49 times negative 67 minus 125. Okay, so go ahead and work out what that is. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. What is the range of the function f of x equals 4x plus 9 given this domain? So here we have the domain. These tell you the inputs, or in other words, the x values. We want to know what's the resulting outputs, or in other words, the y values. So how do we do that? Well, let's plug in each of these values to figure out which list is correct. So first, let's do f of negative 4. I'm replacing the x in the function with negative 4, which is the first number in my domain. So this will be 4 times negative 4. Again, just copying the function, but replacing the x with the input of negative 4. This will give me negative 16 plus 9. Okay, go ahead and figure it out from there. You can plug in the other numbers as well to figure out all the resulting numbers in the range. Find the value of h of 45 in the function below. So again, I'm replacing the x with whatever this input value is. So in this case, the input value is 45. Replacing x in the function with 45. 1/9 times 90 minus x minus 45. Again, replacing the x with whatever the input is. Okay, so go ahead and work out what this is. Remember, do the subtraction first because it's in the parentheses. Which of the following shows a function written in equation notation that is equivalent to the function below? So remember, you just replace f of x with y. That's it. In the notation s of x equals blah, 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 what does s of x represent? Well, s of x is the dependent variable. So dependent. And x is the independent variable. Okay. Think about it. Find the value of g of 25. Again, I'm replacing x here with 25. So g of 25, here the input, or the x value, is 25. So replace the x in the equation with, not 5, 25. Okay, and just work out what this is to figure out the output. Danny's truck has a fuel tank with capacity of 20 gallons. The truck averages 17 miles per gallon of gas. The function m of g equals 17g represents the number of miles that Danny's truck travels on g gallons of gas. What domain and range are reasonable for the function? Well, first let's talk about the domain. The domain is the inputs. In other words, in the case of this problem, it's however many gallons of gas his tank could have in it. So what's the lowest amount that his tank could have? Well, 0 gallons. What's the largest amount his tank can have? Well, it says his tank's capacity is 20 gallons. So that's the largest amount that it could be. Okay, so that should be your domain. And the range are the resulting outputs if you plug this in. Company A manufactures and sells gadgets. The owners have determined that the company has the monthly revenue and cost functions shown, such as X represents the number of gadgets sold. What is the number of gadgets sold? What number, at what number of gadgets sold will the company break even, the point where the revenue equals the cost? Okay, so your break-even point, we talked about this a little bit in the tutorial, but basically the break-even point is when your revenue equation and your cost equation are equal to each other. Okay, so we're going to set our two equations equal to each other. So what's that going to look like? Well, 16x equals 12x plus 1424. And what you're going to do is solve for x here to figure out how many gadgets are needed to break even. Next one, find the intersection point of the following linear functions. Again, this is kind of like the break-even problem. It's essentially the same in a way. To find where the intersection point is, basically you're looking for where these two functions equal each other. So how would we do that? Well, we just go ahead and set them equal to each other. So negative 4x minus 27 equals 2x plus 3. And you just want to solve for x here. My first step here to help me solve for x, I would just add 4x to both sides. That's what I would do first. Giving us that negative 27 equals 6x plus 3. And I think you could solve it from there. Go ahead and do your best. Okay. Actually, let me just finish this problem with you guys. All right, so after that, I think what we would do is go ahead and we want to solve for x. So we're going to subtract 3 both sides. So that'll be negative 30 here equals, and then we have 6x here. To get x by itself, we're going to go ahead and divide by 6 both sides, giving us the x value of negative 5. So we know our x value is negative 5. So it's either going to be B or C. You can see both these have an x value of negative 5. Now what we can do is take this negative 5 and figure out the output into either of these equations. So you can use either equation, doesn't matter. They'll give you both the same answer. So I'm just going to go ahead and use f of x here. So I'm going to replace x with this input of negative 5. And I would like to find the resulting output. In other words, the y value. Okay. So that would be 2 times negative 5, that's negative 10, plus 3 is negative 7. There we go. Joe and Will both work as cooks at Burger Palace. Each prepares hamburgers at a different speed as shown by the functions below. So Joe, he prepares burgers according to this function, and then Will makes burgers according to this function, where B represents the number of hamburgers cooked, and J of B and W of B represent the amount of time each cook takes in minutes. At what value of B will the cooking time be equivalent? So essentially we want to set the two equations equal to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. W of B is 7B plus 42. And I want to set that equal to J of B, which is 14B plus 7. And we want to go ahead and figure out the value of B that makes these equations equal. So we're going to go ahead and subtract 7B, both sides of the equation, because whenever I see my variable on both sides, I like to move them all to one side. That's usually my first step. Okay, so that gives me 7B plus 7. And go ahead, and I think you could solve it from there. Solve for B. Find the value of f of negative 142 for the function below. So here I'm going to find the output when the input is negative 142. So again, I'm going to replace x with this input. So that's going to become negative 0.2 times negative 142 plus 223, just like this, okay? Now for this one, I would just go ahead and we want to add these together here in the parentheses first, then multiply by negative 0.2. Figure out which of those would be the result. The function h of x equals 31x squared plus 77x plus 41 can also be written as which of the following. Okay, remember, you just replace h of x with y, and that's it. Which of the following function notations corresponds to the equation below? So here we have this equation. What I would do is when we want to write an equation like this, we want to write it into function notation. What you want to do is you want to get y by itself. So that's generally your first step, if it's not done already, is let's go ahead and solve for y. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 6.37x to both sides of the equation, giving me that y equals 6.37x minus 3. I can't combine these together because this has an x and this does not. Okay, then just replace y with f of x. Replace y with f of x. Rewrite the following equation as a function of x. Again, we want to solve for y, and then just replace y with f of x. So this one's got a lot of fractions. I don't like that, but let's go ahead and work with it. So the first thing I would do to help me solve for y is I'm going to go ahead and subtract this 1 over 320y. I don't know why they're using like such absurd fractions here. Okay, whatever. Okay, I'm going to subtract that from both sides of the equation. So I've got negative 1 over 320y equals, and I'm going to put the other stuff on the other side of the equation. So I've got 1 over 16, 1/16 x minus 29. Now to help us solve for y, how do I get rid of this fraction here? Well, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and multiply this by negative 320. Now I'm multiplying by a negative because a negative times negative makes positive. And I want this to be a positive y over here. And these 320s cancel. Okay. But if I multiply this side by negative 320, that means you have to multiply this side times negative 320. So this gets multiplied with both of these terms here. 320 divided by 16 gives us negative 20x. Negative times positive is negative. And I just divided 320 divided by 16. And then negative times negative makes positive here. So 29 times 320 is 9,280. And just replace y with f of x. So that's this one. Okay, last one. Rewrite the following equation as a function of x. Again, I want to solve for y. So my first step, we'll go ahead and subtract 10y, both sides of the equation. I'm going to write the y on the left side. Generally, I like to have my output on the left side. So negative 10y equals 680x minus 1,000. Let's go ahead and solve for y here. So what we're going to do is just divide by negative 10. Divide by negative 10. Divide by negative 10. Y equals, positive divided by negative is negative 68 here. So negative 68x. Negative divided by negative is positive 100. And then just replace y with f of x. Okay, well, I hope that all made sense. Hope you're able to get through it. And if you enjoyed the video, you found it useful, please share it with someone. And like, comment, subscribe, you know the deal. All right, well, with that, thanks for watching. See you guys next time. Take care. Stop recording.